I lost it. Tried to deny me any access to my daughter, and I had some carpentry training. At the time I was in the process of building a built-in wardrobe for my daughter, and I had an axe. Hi, my name's Lennox, and this is my episode of Timeline. I was born in Oxford in the UK in 1963. I was born to Caribbean and Indian parents. I have 7 sisters from the same parents. Going to school, there were gangs in Oxford, which is, people may find that hard to think of, but there were gangs that were called boot boys, and every estate, every area had a gang. They seemingly didn't like people of colour, so when they saw me, they used to chase after me and my friend, and if they caught us, they'd beat us up. So it was like that on a daily basis. And then going to school was even worse. So a white kid would stand in the playground at 8:30 every morning and shout blacks against whites. We'd get beaten up. There'd be teachers looking through the windows in the classroom, and you could see them placing bets. Home life was very strict. My parents were an old school generation who believed children should be seen and not heard. They expected you to get a book and read. I wanted to go back outside and hang around with my friends. So I got beaten for disobeying what they said or coming home. Where we got beaten up a lot at school, my clothes were in tatters, and I got beatings for that. They often thought that the reason I ended up looking like that was because of my bad behaviour, not because I was being racially abused. I got beaten with belts, slippers, coat hangers, whatever was to hand. By the time I was 11, I'd been to court 5 times. What happened was I had this brown anorak coat. It had holes in the pockets. News of my stealing got around the racist kids that used to fight us, and their parents then started to ask me to steal for them. And it was the only way they would make their children not racially abuse me or fight me. The worst thing that really affected me during them years is that every Saturday I had chores to do. My mum also used to send me to my godfather's house, and he used to sexually abuse me. Everything was done behind his wife's back. He would sort of find an excuse to get rid of his 2 daughters. Well, this was happening from the age of 7, and it carried on into my teenage years till I was about 13. I would sit on the sofa. He would come and sit next to me and put his hand on my knee and try to move it all the way up into my groin. I would move along the sofa, and every time I moved, he would move until I got to the end of the sofa. By the time I got to 13, it was rape. I was raped. I had asked him at one stage, why can't you love me as a father? And he said, well, I do love you as a father, but I also love you another way. And he was the only one that would try to have conversations with me. I rebelled from my parents. I was defiant, and I took a lot of beatings. My beatings were so severe. I had big, thick welts on my back, my arms, my legs, I ran away from my house naked before to escape a beating. When I go home, my mum used to make my sisters block all the entrances. Once I come in, bearing in mind there's 7 girls, someone would come and stand by that door I just come in. I'd walk around to somewhere else, and my way would be blocked so that my parents could beat me. I ended up being kicked out of so many schools and ended up in care. Things got really bad because I'd run away from an observation assessment that was strict. It had prison cells underneath the establishment, and they were getting ready to send me to a juvenile prison, and I ran away. Didn't have nowhere to go. I ran to the abuser for help, and he took advantage of that situation and raped me. My whole world just crashed. I didn't care after the rape whether I met the racist gangs or not. There was nothing in the world that could have compared with the feeling. Physically, it made me feel like I wanted to take a shit all the time. It just gave you that feeling that you know the signals you get where you need to go to toilet. I could feel this man's penis in my backside, even though it wasn't there anymore. I remember the sperm running down my leg and how cold it felt. I remember his Old Spice aftershave against my baby skin and his bristles on his face. I remember the smell of him and him slapping Vaseline at my backside. The pain for a child, pretended he was going to help me and never did. He only sought his own lustful desires. I ran out of there and I was running back to my parents' house. I just went the normal way. I didn't go the routes I would go to avoid the gangs, because I felt if these gangs stop me and beat me up, it's not going to compare to what's just happened to me. And it was a few weeks before I stopped feeling that pain at my backside. I couldn't have people be affectionate to me. If a girl tried to put her arm around me or touch me, I just couldn't. It affected me for relationships. I was scarred for life, but it also gave me rage. I was in my 20s when I got involved in gangs. I was headhunted, but before I got involved in gangs, I was sent to this approved school. It was like St. Trinian's, but for boys, naughty boys from all over the country, all over the UK. They had a boxing gym and I used to train in it. So I started fighting, started training hard, punching the bag without gloves and toughening my knuckles. And I beat the crap out of lots of people. I had a local drug dealing gang approach me. This gang had heard of my violent reputation, offered me a load of free drugs. They wanted me to work for them as an enforcer. They wanted me to collect debts, score drugs from bigger drug dealers in London. I broke up a fight with a friend of mine and another guy I knew. So my white friend and the guy I knew was black. They were having a fight and I tried to break it up. The black guy started having a go at me. He said, "We're supposed to stick together and you're sticking with him." And I didn't care. I didn't see that I should stick with him because he's black. Broke up the fight, but I had a knife on me, a little knife on me, and it dropped on the floor and I thought I better pick it up before one of them picks it up. They both went to hospital, saw each other in the hospital from different beds and started fighting. The police got involved. When it went to court, the magistrate's court, he had told the police that I repeatedly stabbed him. And so this got me a longer period of time on remand, they had a pre-trial that they realised, well, that's a load of BS. And I was able to get bail. But during that time, my father died in the Caribbean and I couldn't go to the funeral or anything like that. So when I saw this guy, I asked him to meet me around the back of this college. I got a knife and I rammed it in his face. So hard, like a punch. The knife snapped in his face. So I was holding the handle with a bit of blade on it and the rest was sticking out of his face, and I judo threw him to the floor and was bouncing his head off the concrete. He went off to hospital and everything. And when he saw me again, he was still making fun of me. The gang who recruited me, they said he's upstairs in the dance floor, because I thought, when I see this guy again, I'm gonna let him have it. I went upstairs and I saw him, and it was dark. They were playing music, Bob Marley. He was with some girl and I grabbed him, screwed up his clothes around his neck and pulled out my lock knife. He got on his knees. I was about to pierce his skull with this Japanese lock knife. I thought, you're gonna die tonight. And then he freaked me out. I was just about to stab him in his skull and he started praying, started calling on God. And he's a criminal. He's a sometimes drug dealer. He rips people off. He commits crimes. He started like saying a bit of the Lord's Prayer. I was full of rage and anger. And the very mention, when he started mentioning God, for some reason, it just stopped that rage. The rage just decided, look, I'm gonna take a break. I needed that rage to continue. I told him, you ever say anything to me again and I'll kill you. And he could see in my eyes that I was actually gonna do what I was planning on doing. And he thought he was gonna die. There was a guy from an organised crime gang. He lived in Oxford, but the organised crime gang were based in London. And he approached me and said, you know, I'd like to introduce you to some people. I never dressed like this. Tracksuits and things I wore when I was committing crime, doing burglaries, robberies, and certainly to meet this gang, I needed to be well dressed. I used to order suits. So I went down to London, Marylebone area, and in a very posh bar. And I was introduced to a small group of people that consisted of bankers, bank managers, and other business people. Recruited me. I had a mentor, and I had a guy who owned a jewellery shop and was chauffeur driven and lived at the back of Oxford Street. They would give me jobs. It had police, it had people that were in Parliament, it had East End gangsters that were around for the craze. They worked on inside information. So I loaded up armed robberies with them. They had someone in the bank who would tell you who's coming to the bank every week with how much money and what place of business they're coming from. I would choose a blind spot and take the money off them. And my mentor and this other guy would watch from a safe distance, watch me do all these crimes. And then I would go to London, somewhere like Brixton, get a shave and a new haircut, a new set of clothes, and meet them, give them their money, and I had my cut. Someone who's struggling, working 2 jobs, you offer them a few grand for some information, they're gonna do it. And not so long ago when food banks were really thriving, you know, there were police officers going to the food banks. How easy it would have been for this gang to approach an officer I'll give you a few grand, you do some things for us. I was in a relationship with my daughter's mum. We were having a rocky relationship and we fell out. I accused her of cheating on me and she wanted to deny me access to my daughter. Her sister, after doing uni, became homeless, and I'd suggested to my then girlfriend, let her stay with us. And then they started ganging up on me. In my rage, I thought I'd kill you, and I tried to kill her. My daughter was just a baby. I mean, I'd even tried to work things out with her, that I would leave the flat and come and see my daughter on a regular, but no, she didn't want me to have any access at all. I lost it, made me feel that she was seeing someone else. I lost it that she tried to deny me any access to my daughter, and I had some carpentry training. At the time I was in the process of building a built-in wardrobe for my daughter, and I had an axe. I whacked her on the back of the head with the blunt side of the axe, and it knocked her out. And I tried to put a pillow over her face and suffocate her. While I was doing it, I heard this voice inside my head telling me, "What are you doing? Stop." I just couldn't do it. And realising what I'd done, I foolishly tried to make it look like a suicide. Called the ambulance and everything. Dug a massive hole for myself. Initially, I was being charged with attempted murder, which was later brought down to GBH with intent, which also carries a life sentence. I tried to deny it. Everyone was telling me, "You're going to get life." The judge looked at the case. He decided about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. So a lot less than I should have got. I felt really bad. I struggled because of what I did. I found it so hard that I couldn't even watch a film that had violence against women. And I felt so ashamed, that I've got 7 sisters. And regardless of what my ex did, I was so enraged that I committed that level of violence to her. Luckily for me, over a long period of time, we were able to get on, and she was able to forgive me in some way. I had to apply for access to my daughter and, have an hour with her under supervision and build up my time before I could have her on my own. It was like that. And my ex was a saint, really, to be able to forgive me. I scarred her face, and she's got a scar on her face where, not only had I bashed her with the back end of the axe, in trying to make it look like a suicide, I cut her wrists and cut her face. I was an evil monster to have allowed myself to commit such wicked act of violence on this young woman. I weren't out long. I was to do an armed robbery with a group of guys. One in particular kept not being there when we were going to plan the job. He owed me money, and I went to see him, and we got into an argument. I had a different knife, and when I got outside his flat, I pulled out some of the knife. It was a mini Rambo knife, so not like these zombie knives. It was a smaller version of a Rambo knife with the serrated edge. I pulled it out a bit, I had a taxi waiting. I thought I'd just cut him in his face, but it went up through his mouth, through his tonsils, and it nearly came out the back of his head. When I pulled that out of his mouth, it made such a hole and there was so much blood. And I just put the knife away and walked and got in the taxi as if nothing happened. And the police tried to get him to press charges, lied to him saying he would get compensation, but he was a criminal, drug dealer, violent man, committed crimes. And so he tried to, grass me up to the police to get money, which he never got. And I went to court for him, but I was up for 2 charges, stabbing him in the neck. Around that time, we had decided to go out to celebrate, and there was this gay guy who I only found this information out at court, but anyway, he'd watched me had a few drinks and everything, and I got wasted because I was smoking weed and drinking alcohol. And my mates after the club decided to go with these girls. When the fresh air hit me, I thought, I need to go home. This man followed me, stopped me on my way, and asked me to come to this house for a drink. I kept saying no, but eventually said yes, got in the car, taxi with him to this house. I collapsed on the sofa, and he went to get me a drink. I didn't like the drink he got me, so I tipped it away. When he saw my glass empty, he went and got me another drink and came back in just with his underpants on. I managed to get up, staggered to the door, said, sorry, I'm not like that, mate, and tried to get out. He then grabbed me and tried to force me to stay. My alarms went off. I was in his house about 5 hours, but I walked up and down the stairs, different rooms, trying to keep this man away from me, saying any rubbish that would. And I walked into the kitchen and he blocked my exit. And he got on all fours, took off his pants. He started sticking his tongue out of his mouth, rolling it around his mouth and making these obscene faces. And I backed away and I backed into the draining board. And I looked to my side and I saw a knife on the draining board. And I grabbed the knife and stuck it in my pocket. I don't think he saw me pick the knife up and put it in my pocket, but he was beckoning me to get behind him and have sex with him. I got behind him, pulled the knife out of my pocket, and I rammed it up his backside. He didn't make a sound, just turned his head towards me and had this weird, scary expression. And it freaked me out. And in my state, I started laying into him in rage. And when I finished, he was unconscious on the floor. And I couldn't even run away. I went and sat down in the lounge and I thought, bloody hell, I've only just come out for a drink with the boys and I've killed someone because I thought I killed him. I sat there for hours, and then when I managed to get a bit more sense into my head, I thought, right, I need to make it look like a burglary or robbery. I went upstairs looking for bags. I found some hold-all bag, and I started putting valuables in it. When I finished, because I couldn't wipe my prints off everywhere. I couldn't remember what I'd touched or whatever, so I left, got on a bus and went to where I was staying. And I told the gang, and then they were watching the papers and the news for me every day, no news. And they cleaned the flat of my prints. And 8 days later, they took him to the doctors, and the doctor examined him and said, that wound is scabbed over, so he can't do anything. But on his way home from the doctors, he collapsed. And he was 3 months on a life support machine. And the only way the police got to know about this, how I was charged for that and the stabbing the guy in the throat, was because my landlady, she used to steal people's child benefit books and cash them, and she got caught. And the police said, well, you're going to get 2 years for that. And she started telling them about me and what I'd done, because when I got back to her place, I was offloading on her. She was a criminal. I felt I could talk to her. She grasped me up to the police. 2 trials I had. And the police said to me, Lennox, if you was a woman, you wouldn't even have been charged. And the judge, he didn't know the details, but he found out I'd been sexually abused. And he said he's going to give me 4 years, which was lenient. And he said, because there was a point where you could have left, where the man was blocking my exit, and I saw the knife. I thought, right, you wouldn't let me leave before. No, I ain't gonna leave. And the judge recommended that I get some therapeutic help, because I got off with the stabbing the guy through the mouth, because he came to court with all this swagger, and when he was being asked questions, he was telling the barrister that, you know, go and suck your mum and all that. And the jury was not impressed with him, so they rather believed my story than his. So I got acquitted of his, but I got found guilty of that guy because of my landlady. Well, I'd been in and out of prison for 21 years. I'd been to 16 different prisons. How I ended up on the streets is because my life started to decline. I didn't want to die on the streets. And I remembered a judge saying to me, if you get convicted for another knife crime, you go to prison for the rest of your life. I thought, I can't kill myself. I had some failed attempts in the past. So I thought, I'll stab someone. But Oxford Street was so busy with families and people and kids. And it took me a week to find a man going to a cash point on his own. And I didn't have a knife, I had a bradawl, a sharp implement for making holes for screws. So you have to have something on you for being on the streets. I went up to this guy and I said, you got any spare change? And as I said it, I rammed this bradawl into his face. But instead of, I was this side of him. Somehow, instead of going straight in his face, it went up the left side of his face. Anyway, he screamed, dropped his wallet. For a moment, thought, I could pick up his wallet, but I decided to run. Instead of staying there, I weren't even thinking. I should have stayed there and waited for the police, because I wanted to go to prison, but I ended up running. As I was running, I noticed the guy was running next to me, and I looked at him and he looked at me, and then he screamed and ran the other way. I got to the corner of the road on Oxford Street, and I looked to my left and I saw an alley. And I ran towards the alley, and as I got into the alley, it was so dark, I couldn't see my hands. It wasn't lit up, and it was a thick darkness, and I had to feel the walls, and then lean over to feel the other side, and slowly shuffled my way around, went round this corner, bumped into these industrial bins, pushed them apart and sat on the floor. And while I was sat on the floor, I started crying, thinking, how did I end up here and that? You know, it's just my own thoughts are, God, I hope this guy isn't too badly injured, because, you know, what an awful thing to do, to use an innocent guy who's done nothing to you to try and get you to prison. Anyway, this arm appeared right in front of me, and it was white, but it wasn't so white that it lit up the alley. You still couldn't see a thing. I could hear this voice saying, take my hand. And I just was freaked out, because like when you commit a crime, your adrenaline's rushing. Eventually I thought, you know, this sounds a bit like God, you know, and I thought, that's a load of rubbish. I've tried him and he don't work. Then I realised what I was hearing was someone was answering the thoughts I was having, and the voice said, "Have you really tried me?" I ended up agreeing to take this hand because it said, "What have you got to lose? You're about to die." And I went over to the arm. It was just air. It never moved. It was just air. It asked me to choose to do what's right and trust him for the rest. And I ended up handing myself into the police, told them what I'd done. They got me 2 huge detectives in to sit down and interview, and they wanted me to tell them my story for hours. Several hours we sat in an interview room, and they ran out crying. One of them did, to get more tissues, which was unusual. But they listened to my story and they wanted to help me. Having had the interview in the police station, it led to me being taken to prison. I wrote to the judge and told the judge that I was guilty of the crime and he should throw the book at me and throw away the key. He decided not to give me a life sentence. He decided that somewhere in this I didn't mean to do it. Luckily as well, the man who was injured didn't have any life-threatening injuries, was able to recover from that experience, as traumatic as it may have been for him. And I was in prison. He'd given me about 3 years. I was asked by 2 youth workers to come and talk to a 40-strong gang. They wanted to know what prison was like. I sat and talked to them for about 2 hours. And it made them, they all looked like little kids, even though they were big for their age and that, but it freaked them out. And some of the gang members tried to get out of the gang, ran away. One ran away to Manchester. Some of the girls confessed that they'd been sexually abused in the gang and raped. It just opened up a can of worms of issues and things that helped the youth workers to be able to try and get them some help and support. My now wife had said to me, I said I'd like to help refocus the lives of these kids. And she said, that's what you should call the charity. I started doing Refocus from 2005. It became a registered charity in 2006. I can't say sorry to the people that I've hurt in my life. There wasn't any way to say sorry, and sorry probably wouldn't have been enough. So I thought maybe I can help by trying to stop some of these young people from going down the same road as me. And so that was my motivation for Refocus. It was my way of saying sorry. I began to rescue kids from gangs. I worked in schools, I worked in the local community, I worked with a lot of gangs. I managed to get some work in prisons as well. So it's been 19 years. My day consists of doing a lot of, when it's not school holidays, I'm in the schools doing child criminal exploitation sessions that teaches kids how to stay away from the gangs. I've been working in 2 prisons, one of which I've been doing reducing offending, and they said that for the 18 to 25-year-olds, I reduced the offending 88%. So they said, don't work with that age group anymore, work with the older ones. News got around, they want me in some other prisons to do the same thing. I'm co-founder of Refocus and the author of this book, Breaking Better. It was written in 2018. I was on LBC News and someone heard me who said they wanted to help and they paid for the book to be written. I had a difficult life growing up, and perhaps in some ways there were lots of reasons why I turned out to be the person that I did. But in my eyes, the fact that my childhood was hard, it was a different time and there was all this racism. I don't see it as an excuse for me to have committed the crimes I did and got involved with the people I did, and and perhaps I should have been punished a lot more severe than what I was. But now, living a changed life, it's not about how you start in life, it's about how you finish. Just because you've had a difficult life, it's not an excuse to go and damage someone else's life. And so the best thing you can leave a person is a good example on how to be a decent human being. And I make right choices every day to try not to go down that road. I held my hands up. I was an evil monster in my eyes. I was hurt so bad that it just made me think bad, and I was very violent, and perhaps I should have got the death penalty if there was one. I don't defend myself at all, and I don't glamorize the lifestyle I had when things were going good in the gangs. It's not the life, it's a short-lived life. I'm lucky to be alive.